Fantastic. You happy for me to start?
Yep.
Great. So welcome to the third day of our community engagement event. We've had a fantastic couple of days already. Lots of different guests, lots of different comments, kind of some overall themes that are emerging, which Gina will summarise for us at the end of today's session. So today, a slightly different style. We're kind of having an open debate, a chance for everybody in the audience to ask questions. So we're really looking forward to a very interactive session. But first, I would like our panel to introduce themselves and to give a quick overview of their work. And then I'll start off by just asking each of you a kind of question along our theme today, which is really kind of what next after COVID-19, and we'll take it from there. So really look forward to everybody's contributions today as well. So Amanda, CEO of Healthwatch, would you just mind giving us a little bit of an overview of Healthwatch in Cornwall?
No, not at all. So Healthwatch Cornwall has been in existence since 2013. We are one of 152 Healthwatches across England, and we exist with a statutory remit to be the voice really of the public in terms of health and social care services. So our role is to ensure that their experience and their needs and wishes influence the development and design of health and social care services. We also manage a number of engagement projects, or host them, a maternity voices project, a safeguarding engagement project, and we've recently developed a new engagement tool, a digital engagement tool that we're looking to promote more now, which is for people to engage with each other, but also with the system so they can talk to professionals through the system in terms of being able to highlight what it is that they would like to see. And I'll come on later to talk about how we've changed following COVID, but I took up this role 3 years ago now, and my background is in the charity sector. So Healthwatch Cornwall is a community interest company and not-for-profit and an independent organisation, and I think that's where our strength lies, in our independence. We don't offer any services. We are here purely to represent people's views.
Thanks for that, Amanda. That's really helpful. And Kim, the CEO of Cornwall Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, as Nikki says, Chief Executive of Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, which is the business association, and we also run Made in Cornwall CIC. The other two shareholders in that are Cornwall Council and Visit Cornwall. Interested to hear people's take on business. Been a very tough year for lots of Cornwall small business owners, obviously, and yet I'm not quite seeing locally the cliff edge at the end of furlough that's being forecast by some people. So everybody's seen the headline of 1 in 3 businesses expecting to make redundancies in the next 3 months. I'd be interested in the collective view of the panel this afternoon on whether we're feeling that in Cornwall. For me, it's a bit more nuanced at the moment, and there's still a lot to play for, indeed. But we are lobbying government for some more creative extension to furlough, something which puts the power back into business owners to determine what will work for them, rather than the blanket approach of furlough that we've had, which we've all been very grateful for. I'm also a trustee of Cornwall Community Foundation and a director of Creative Kerno, topics which might cover things that come up this afternoon as well. I'm delighted to be here, Nikki. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks ever so much. And Andy Brelsford, obviously Volunteer Cornwall, been very busy in this period as well. So great to have an overview of your organisation.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Andy Brelsford. I'm Support and Development Manager at Volunteer Cornwall, and currently also our COVID coordinator. And I'm also Embrace Care, something or other. We've been around 40 odd years in Cornwall, and at the heart of our ethos is the belief in social action and the power of people to do things for themselves, for each other, in their own communities. And I think never has that been put to the test to any greater extent than the last few months through COVID. But I think we can all agree that what we've seen collectively as a society, right across society, but particularly in Cornwall, our communities coming together, standing together and saying, you know, we're here for each other, and just the outpouring of support for people right across the spectrum, really, in all walks of life, all ages, people wanting to support each other, wanting to help their neighbours and do things that perhaps they haven't tried before or haven't volunteered in the past, or maybe a long time ago. But now they've got a taste for it, they are wanting to do more, and that is hugely encouraging, and hopefully we can dig a bit deeper into that today.
That's great, thank you very much. And Jo Willis, so CEO of Shallal.
Oh yes, okay, well thank you for inviting me in late. Yes, help. So Shallal is a small Cornish arts charity. We've been going for over 30 years. I suppose I don't know what's interesting. We went quite quickly into Zoom when all this happened. We also went into post. We also were aware of the difference of the technology gap and the support gap and the financial gap that it raised for all the people we work with. Where we're going next is we brought in someone to help us with our COVID policy and briefing, and that person is now helping us with our risk assessments. So we have always wanted to go in one-to-one and work with people on a small level, but we haven't been able to through lack of funding. So the positive thing that's come out of COVID is we've gone into people's homes and we're working with them one-to-one through Zoom, through post, through phone calls. So we want to maintain that once we come out Zoom. So we're building up we've had Reaching Communities funding just for some of our things. We already had Henry Smith funding for what we deliver. We had Reaching Communities funding just before COVID started, which was a huge relief, and it was a social grant, so that enabled us to keep going. We've also had Reaching Communities emergency funding, and so that's all gone very well. And within that, at the same time, because I was stuck at home, I suddenly could go on all these what do you call them? Zoom sort of seminars and talks. And we ran one for Regenerative Visions for the Arts in Cornwall. I was inspired by lots of people I'd seen. Jayne came on it as well. We had 73 people sign up in the arts from all over the world, but mainly Cornwall. And we had 50 on that Zoom. So I am very passionate about what I've come across and learned, which is things like donut economics. And we are now part of Cornwall Donut Collective, and we're doing things like that. Okay.
Thanks ever so much, Jo. And then over to Jayne Howard, who's the Artswell Director.
Hi, yes, thanks. So founder and director of Artswell, which is a community interest company, sort of new kid on the block and been around for less than 4 years, but I've worked in this field of arts, health and wellbeing for, I don't know, 16, 17 years, something like that now. So our role is really to advocate for the role of creativity, arts and culture in health and wellbeing. So although we deliver projects, my role now is primarily about making connections, enabling collaboration, facilitating people to do the work that they do. One of the roles that Artswell's taken on just before COVID was to develop a creative health and wellbeing partnership for the county, which brings together health and social care, voluntary and community sector and creative and cultural sector. We were due to have our second meeting of that burgeoning partnership on the 17th of March. So you can imagine the timing for that wasn't great, but so we will be resurrecting that, but over the time of COVID, there's been a lot of work been happening in the creative and cultural sector. I mean, I think it's been a fantastic response from the sector as a whole, and it'd be worth picking up some of that a little bit later. So we provide training and development workshops for creative practitioners and for health and social care staff, networking opportunities. All of those went online, and again, interesting what I've learned from that and what we'll be doing moving ahead in terms of sort of what next. Passionate about the role of arts, culture and creativity for people's health and wellbeing. And interestingly, the National COVID-19 Social Study, which had hundreds of thousands of people contributing every week, showed that I think it was 22% of more adults engaged with arts, culture and creativity during COVID than had done previously, and that was right across the demographic. And what they also concluded was that engagement in arts, culture and creativity was the most protective factor for people's mental well-being during the pandemic. above even, I hate to say it, Andy, volunteering and exercise, you know. So it really interesting. So there's a real moment here, I think, for the creative sector to you know, really start to demonstrate the role that it can play.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And the questions have started coming through already. So I'm, which is absolutely delighted. So kind of more the merrier, please. Everybody keep going. So Nigel has just raised a question for Kim, which is about noting several small businesses, startups in recent weeks, and really how you kind of see that sustainability going forward.
Yeah, it's obviously a huge moot point at the moment, but I do think that in Cornwall we've got a long track record of being innovative and creative, and also not just relying on sort of boom periods to fund business startups. And if businesses start in tough times like this, they tend to be very grounded with you know, keeping their costs under control and modest revenue expectations. And from tough times like this in Cornwall in the past have grown some real beautiful businesses. So I hope that they are being set up by people who understand the risks, and that they are sustainable. And Nigel then goes on to make the point about being you know, encouraging local people to support their local businesses. And there's a huge groundswell of this. The Chamber of Commerce is relaunched our Choose Cornish campaign, and that's not only for consumers but in business buyers as well, to look for procuring from local businesses if they're if you possibly can. Always think of that first. And that's sitting alongside Cornwall Council's Keep It Cornish, and the Cabinet Office, even nationally, was encouraging very much in the spirit of sort of Small Business Saturday, but over a much longer period of time, to people to look to their local suppliers and providers and agencies first. You know, and I think that if anything good comes from this COVID crisis, it will be that we want to cut down the miles we commute to work, or that we source our supplies from. And I think that, you know, some of the things we were doing in Cornwall anyway, this has accelerated the best practice, and I hope that we can all not just treat that as a sort of part-time or temporary process, but actually look to the future of supporting our businesses and our you know, business buyers and consumer buyers looking to local providers first. I think would be a very healthy consequence of this terrible year.
Thanks very much, Kim. And Amanda, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in and support really what Kim's just said, because I think supporting local businesses it's about building on this amazing community spirit that we've seen over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, and it's not, you know, part of the community looking after itself and each other is supporting their local businesses, because behind every business is a person and a family, and that group of people are dependent on that business both for their livelihood, but it also affects, when we're talking about health and well-being, you know, we know that mental health and well-being is directly related to people's ability to pay for their food, to pay for their family, to keep a roof over their head. So supporting local businesses is more than just about supporting business. It's also about supporting your community and your neighbours, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jayne?
Yeah, just to come in on that, I think again it's really interesting, this idea of people turning to culture and creativity, and we saw lots of things nationally. So Grace and Perry's Art Club, for example. But I mean, it was really important locally. I was sending out a weekly newsletter, really trying to highlight the local opportunities, because once things like that disappear off the scene, it's about how do we support people locally with the resources in their local area, and how do we connect people up. So what was interesting was how many, and you know, in the creative sector it is small businesses and freelancers primarily, but how you know, how they became sort of really micro local in terms of a lot of their delivery, but how valuable that was in that community. And I'm hoping that, you know, we can sort of really strengthen those relationships as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you. And Andy, I'm just wondering, obviously a lot of people in COVID that were volunteering and coming from local businesses. How do you see us sustaining the level of volunteering post COVID-19 from people from across different sectors?
Well, I think we need to recognise that what happened was in response to something that was quite unique. And although we looking and thinking now about how we sustain that. It's important to recognise it won't be in the same model. In other words, we won't have, because lots of people were at home 24/7 for a long period of time, that we had lots and lots of people who were chomping at the bit to get out and do things to help. Now that people have gone back to work, some of those people are still wanting to help, but their availability is reduced. And so I think as a sector, it's quite critical that we rethink our ask of volunteers. And many organisations already have done this before now, but we need to be saying, okay, what time have you got to offer, and then think, how do we make use of that time, rather than the traditional model of saying, I need somebody from 2 till 5 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can't. Yeah. You're no good to me. So I think we as the sector need to rethink how we make best use of the time that people have got to offer, and we need to recognise that sometimes people will say, sorry, I can't do that this week, I'm going to the granny, or we're taking the dog out or something, and that's fine. It's, again, recognising that just because somebody can't commit full-time, ongoing, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, doesn't mean they're not interested.
Yeah, thank you. And Claire, just from a community engagement officer perspective, with the hospice, kind of how are you seeing kind of engagement with your services, and what's kind of happening kind of across the piece? I mean, obviously you're doing more of these kinds of events. You've got a great outreach program already, so it would be great to kind of get your perspective on this so far as well.
So the way we've been working, of course, is very different, but our aims are still the same: to get out there and to take a little bit of the hospice to people when and where they need it most. So that's just changed in the way we do it. And I think in future going forward, things like this have really shown us how important collaborative working is, joint working with other people, other professionals and communities alike, to make sure that we're delivering exactly what people need when they need it and where they can access it the most in the easiest format possible. So I think this time has given us a great opportunity to look at that more closely and do all the things that we'd already thought about, but just in a quicker time frame than perhaps we would have done them anyway. So I think it's a great opportunity.
And Jo, you've got your hands up.
Well, I was just thinking in response to what Kim said, I'm very aware that, especially if we go forwards with more sustainable economics, we need to look at how people can transfer skills, because some jobs and businesses aren't going to be able to go forwards for many reasons. So we need to start looking not just at how we deal with the crisis, but how we actually enable people to transfer across into easier employment and everything. I mean, it's a bigger picture thinking. And the other thing I'm really concerned about is that as everything opens up, there are still all these vulnerable people who are still really shut down. And now they're feeling it, because it was all right. We were all in one boat together and everyone was pulling together and people were volunteering and everything. And I'm really concerned for those people. And I'm really concerned for the dips in and out that we're going to open up, close down, open up, close down. So I don't have any answers, but I think we have to be really careful. And I'm mindful, even when I talk in my group today, and I'm saying, oh, we might open up this and we might start doing that. And I've got a couple of people who are there and they're closed down. The father in the family is severely ill. There are 5 people in a council house and they're not going anywhere. And that's really tough, so I'm just very concerned for those people as well.
And Kim?
That second point is clearly, I mean, people have been more neighbourly and community spirited, and we do need to find ways to keep that going. And being a business person, this COVID crisis can be the catalyst to change, but it needs people with a plan to implement it. And we do need to take up that second point there that Jo's made very, very seriously. The first point, for those who are feeling a little bit more, I know it's very tough if you're being threatened with redundancy or whatever, but there are great opportunities being opened up. Some of our businesses are already doing things differently, and if people can motivate themselves in tough circumstances to sort of be feel positive, there are some great apprenticeship opportunities which are now open to people of every age from both our excellent FE colleges in Cornwall, and grants to do that, to get people set up on those, and retraining and reskilling and thinking about starting your own single person or micro business in these circumstances is quite an appealing option if you can find the motivation to do that. And there are plenty of help, Chamber of Commerce and beyond, to help you start up in business. So as Jayne was saying, in the creative sector, the long track record is of individual practitioners mainly, and there are other sectors with technology that's available now where that can be done. So you can work from home on a computer-based business in all sorts of spheres now that weren't available a few years ago. So there are opportunities opening up, and there are jobs in those sectors which have been able to pivot into something different in this period. I like Joe, I am not glib at all. There are some people in very tough times still, and I don't want to underplay that. And the next 3 months is looking very worrying, but there are opportunities as well for people to look at new ways of doing things. And if sectors like the creative sector, like food and drink and other things that in Cornwall we've got a really long successful track record of innovating in, if we can use this tough time to think creatively, then that's it could cheer some people up, I think.
Yeah, and Amanda?
So it was picking up on Joe's second point, and I think it's a really, really valid one around that sort of waves of uncertainty, not really knowing whether we're going to be in lockdown, local lockdown, we're out of lockdown. There are people who are no longer officially shielding but continue to shield because they're really nervous. A lot of parents really worried about their kids going back to school this week and uncertainty around that and what that's going to mean for them. So I think there's a great deal of if you scratch the surface, there is a great deal of uncertainty out there, and people need to be supported through that. Something I read recently was New Philanthropy Capital, I think, did some research which was published last week around across the UK, 7 million people expect to access charities for support over the next 3 months, and that's a tremendous. I don't know what the figure for Cornwall is, and I don't know if we can break that down, but that's a huge number of people, and it highlights, I think, the importance of the third sector and the services that we provide, and that for me has a real message about the sustainability of the sector and about people being able to support locally, but also local authorities and commissioners supporting local organisations and local charities to be able to provide the services which were so evidently needed during that period. It was really, I think it was organisations like Volunteer Cornwall, it was small community organisations within a very small local area who really turned out and supported their locality. So those are the sorts of organisations that are going to need a lot of support. But the other point that Joe made around those people who are vulnerable, I think we also have to be mindful of those groups of people who are disproportionately affected by ill health and by COVID too, actually. So those groups that it's always been quite difficult to reach, but it has become even more difficult to reach actually now, if the only way we can get through to people is digitally. And there's a great swathe of people out there who don't access things digitally, and we have to be really creative, I think, about how we reach those people and offer our support.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Sally, you would like to raise a point.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yep, good, fine. I'd like to address Kim. I'm very interested in the business side of life in Cornwall, in as much as how much is sustainability a real focus in the discussions, and what who's saying what about where people see core businesses growing and developing in Cornwall that will be here for long term, and in fact, on small scale and maybe even a bigger scale. We have all this hype and everybody's sustainable this and that, etc. But are people actually engaging with that and going to be setting up these businesses, and what are they? Renewables, food, etc.
Big question. How long have you got? One of the 10 opportunities that's been identified for Cornwall is renewable energy, and there's a real buzz around that at the moment. Floating offshore wind has just been awarded, I think it's 32 million to develop out in the Celtic Sea, and that's something we're really all excited about, and that will that will develop a whole industry around it. You know, and if you think about the 20th century, that period of sort of mass-produced, homogenized products didn't really suit Cornwall very well. But now there's this interest in sustainability and provenance and traceability. These are all playing to Cornwall's strengths in a way that weren't being done in the past. And we have the most hours of sunshine, believe it or not. We have the most access to prevailing wind. We've got the longest coastline. So all of these things which are needed for renewable energy sourcing are really playing to our strengths. That's really developing very nicely at the moment. For the rest of the business sectors, 98% of Cornwall's business owners live in Cornwall. So they are absolutely embedded in the communities here and are as protective of our wonderful place as anybody else is. And most of them are very aware of both their corporate social responsibility and their environmental responsibility, and there are very active groups and incentives and discussions around making sure that everybody here is acting sustainably. So it is very much part of life here now. The Cornwall Chamber of Commerce runs the Cornwall Sustainability Conference each summer, apart from this one, obviously, which was a bit of a shame. And the Cornwall Council have the Cornwall Sustainability Awards. So there's a huge profile of the role of sustainable practices in business. And, you know, when you think you've got 25,000 odd VAT registered businesses and another 35,000 odd micro businesses and sole traders operating below the VAT threshold, if you can get those people largely acting in a sustainable way for the prosperity through environmental reasons of our local communities, then that is very strong indeed. Also, alongside the local enterprise partnership is the local nature partnership, and they again are great advocates, led by Kevin Guston, who's a professor at the Environment and Sustainability Institute at the Penryn campus of Exeter University. So there's some really top practitioners in Cornwall around this, and if you are interested ever in getting somebody from those areas to come and speak to a group of people, you'll find some, as I say, world leaders here in Cornwall. So I'm pretty confident that with the sort of public vision of Cornwall Council and the private psyche of, well, all of us, I guess, but business owners particularly, we are heading to a better way of doing business in the future.
Can I come back to you? Is that all right, Nikki?
Yeah, that's fine, Sally.
Yeah, fine. Okay, fine. Okay. The rhetoric is great. And I'm sure delivered, I don't mean to be insulting here, but the rhetoric is great and delivered, I'm sure, many times at meetings, etc. But is this being communicated to the people? And do the people of Cornwall realise that, that there's a big push on sustainability? And what are you going to do to try and take more businesses with you and make more people in our small communities aware of the fact that we should be all working towards sustainability, whatever the business is, and the environment, whether it's noise pollution from loud music at night or whatever it is everybody's responsibility to do something about and make everybody's life acceptable, so there's a consensus as to how we all live together.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be stretching it for me to start commenting on how we affect loud music at night, for example.
Well, that was just one example, but, you know, plastic bags in small shops, why haven't they already gone? Because we all know that they're a really bad idea. We don't wait for, we shouldn't be waiting for things to come in. Yeah, sorry, right.
Of course, there's no magic wand at all.
No, of course there isn't, yeah.
It's a long process of changing people's habits, bad habits in many cases, that have been ingrained for many a time. But you will find, if you start looking between Cornwall Council's very strident views on this and what they, for example, will not procure from businesses that haven't got environmental policies now, that sort of thing. And from a Chamber of Commerce point of view, we ourselves are advocating everything from using bottled water to no plastic bags to whatever, and it is all of us being combined. And as you say, it's not just a campaign. This is something forever. This is a forever change of behaviours, which for it to work better, it's better that it doesn't doesn't work hastily. It works in a properly organised and sustainable fashion. And there's some great advocates in the county, so it's more than just rhetoric.
Thanks, Kim, for that. Really appreciate it. Got Clare next.
Right, thank you.
It was just going back to the point when Amanda was speaking last, and also about the issue of connectivity and how this has really brought that to light, that people really aren't particularly connected from an internet perspective. And all the things that we sort of set up, like our virtual community cafe going online, and advice on our website. And also we were part of the Cornwall Bereavement Network, which of course set up a website. And all the contact details we had to sort of pinpoint people to were either websites or phone numbers to call. And if people don't have the access to that, it was really tricky to be able to give them the same level of support if they didn't have that access. And things like our listening ear service that we've had have just been so vital. And although we can't see people, we can at least offer some support over the phone. And if they've got a phone line and they can speak to us, that's been a real benefit to a lot of people. But the amount of people that say, oh, yes, I'd love to get that information, but I can't go online. I don't have the facility to go online. And I think if we keep going in this in out situation that we're currently in, that's going to increasingly be a big problem. And again, it kind of takes us back to that importance of smaller communities getting together and banding together and helping each other out more.
Yeah, thank you ever so much. Jayne?
So a couple of points. Firstly, just on the point about sustainability that Kim was talking about. Again, we've got an opportunity here, I think, because one of the things that the What Cornwall Wants stuff is looking at is it comes about from what are the things from this awful situation, what are the things that we don't want to lose? And a lot of people have commented already, the things they don't want, things that they are fearful of losing is that, the better environment that we had, because we had less litter around and less cars and all of that stuff. So we have got, there's a bit of an opportunity again to build on some of that and to say what do we want to happen moving forward. So I just wanted to make that point. But on this issue about connectivity, again, I harp on about the creative sector, but that's what I know about. But through this crisis, we have seen people, as Joe said, people really innovative about connecting with people. And so Feast funded, like 100 projects of practitioners over this period. And we're really clear that this was not all about digital. So there was lots of stuff that was about postal, about individual delivery in small communities, using volunteers who, maybe aren't needed to do the sorts of jobs that they were needed to do before, but still might be able to get involved in actually doing some face-to-face work safely with an individual. Postal services, telephone stuff. There's a whole range of ways in which we can still maintain that connectivity. But I do think it probably is on that very local scale. So the sort of digital gives us the opportunity to be global. So like Joe, I was able to engage in national and international seminars and have people attending my training stuff from all over the place, which was brilliant. But there's also that very local work that we need to be doing, which I think is where Andy's point about volunteers and having a lot of people who are really keen to volunteer, but it might not be in those traditional volunteering roles. It might be more around something that is just innovative and interesting in their local community. They can help deliver some activity packs to people, or share some interesting ideas with people in the local community. I live in Falmouth, but I live in a small sort of area of houses, and I knew some of my neighbours, but not all. But one of the guys there set up a WhatsApp group for our community, and that's continued. And will continue, I think, because it's proven to be a really useful sort of vehicle. Not everybody's on WhatsApp, but we can all talk to the people, put notes through doors, that sort of thing. It's been amazing. So it's building on those sorts of things, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of comments coming up in the chat box, and Tracy Roos and made a good point yesterday as well about the huge proportion of people that are still disconnected in Cornwall on the periphery of our communities, and how we collectively going forward going to ensure that we have a more inclusive programme of support at a time when everything is moving online. So I guess a bit of an open question to the panel there. Followed up by Julie Wilson really saying there's an opportunity for commissioners to do something different on a local level if we can identify local needs and pump prime communities to look after themselves by giving smaller amounts of funding to locally based providers. So it'd be great to kind of have your thoughts on those 2 points, please. Joe, you've got your hand up as well, so come to you first.
I don't know if I'm answering what was going on before, but I think, you know, I mean, I've been invited in by you, Nikki, because you're a community navigator in that role. And when I was on yesterday and listening to all the wonderful things all the charities were doing in Cornwall, I mean, I'm a fairly literate, reasonably intelligent person, and I can't bear it. You know, it's like you go in to see someone sometimes and they go like, oh, well, have you tried? There's this befriending service, and then there's this list of charities or options they give you, and your mind is boggled. And especially if you're feeling in a weak space, you can't do any of it. You know, the worst thing is when you go in with mental health problems and someone gives you a list of people to contact. You know, well, that's not going to happen in 100 years. So I do think that the community navigators and like a person who meets you through a GP, through something like that, is actually valid, because then they can streamline where you go. I think otherwise, you know, you have this wonderful things, these plethora of projects, which are fantastic, but often you hear about them after they've been, unless it's local. You know, got a plethora of charities who may or may not be available to you, but actually you do need somewhere where people can go, because we have got so much that's good in Cornwall. There is usually an answer to your question, but whether when you're low income, possibly slightly illiterate, and haven't got a lot of energy or time, how you can access those, I think is part of our challenge, you know. And so that, I think that's part of what we need to consider when we're trying to reach out to people. Yeah.
Yeah, Amanda, you had your, I'm sorry for a little while, but there's lots of things happening all at once. So just your thoughts on that.
It means I'm not quite sure which point to respond to now, but I'll respond to one I can remember, which is the one that you just talked about, Jo, because I think that's where social prescribing really comes into its own, where there are people who are on the ground, you know, in their local communities, knowing what's going on in their local communities, but importantly can handhold and help people make some of those choices, not make them for them. I'm not advocating that at all, because I think it's really important people are giving choice and allowed to make their own choices and make informed choices. But you're absolutely right. The last thing you want to think about when you need help is making decisions when people throw so much information at you. So I think though the support at a local level is clearly what people want. That's been demonstrated over the last 4 months really, really visibly. So that in itself is really important. And then there was a comment a little while ago about communities, and I was saying in the chat box what I felt communities were, which is something that I believe has to be self-defined. Communities define themselves. We're human beings, and we don't, as much as bureaucrats would like us to fit into little boxes, we don't fit into little boxes. We are one of many communities. You know, I'm part of a community of grandmas, and I'm a part of a community of women, and I'm part of a team in my organisation, and I'm a trustee of a national charity, and I do all sorts of things. So I'm part of loads of communities. So people identify with lots of different communities, but can be reached in many, many different ways. And I think an example for me would be traditionally people have tried to reach children through schools, and it's really important that they try to reach children through schools, but there will be some children and young people who won't respond to anybody trying to reach them through schools. So try and reach them through youth clubs, or try and reach them through the local football club, or try and reach them through, you know, there's all sorts of, the skate park, whatever it might be. There are different ways of reaching people. There isn't always only one route.
Yeah, thank you. Catherine Enver, and then Andy Brelsford.
Thank you very much. Actually, that's really, I've been listening to all the chat really, and Amanda just picking up on children and young people there really. I think I was just stepping in really to highlight really children and young people as also potentially, you know, quite disproportionately affected in these times. And just going back to Kim talking about the chamber and sustainability and things like that, and just thinking how and where young people and children have opportunities also within all the projects that are going on. I know with Cornwall We Want and things like that, trying to reach out and work and engage with young people as well, so that they feel part of decisions being made, particularly as not only affects now but as they move forward, and how certain situations at the moment, including things like connectivity, impacting on their development, their health, their well-being. I love that, you know, what Jayne was talking about in terms of creative activities and things to engage in, because I think there's so many areas that young people otherwise are missing out on that will impact on their development. So but again, actually, as part of this group, I don't know many of you at all, but my role is Children's Rights Officer within the local authority, within Together for Families, working with partners to look at how we are promoting and upholding children's rights. So if it's all right to do a bit of a sell on here, if there's anybody that is involved today that would like to talk more about how we uphold and promote children's rights within the work that we're doing, and being quite explicit about that, and supporting children and young people and their families to know and understand what rights they have, and access to what they need for their kind of protection and development, please get in contact. But it was just really to champion children and young people, really.
Thanks so much for that. Great comments. Andy?
I wanted to just pick up on, I think it was Julie's point about commissioners, and I don't disagree, but we have just spent the last few years as a system, commissioners have, in moving away from giving lots of small grants to local organisations and giving all the money to one or two big organisations. So it may be a while before that wheel goes round again, unfortunately. But in terms of the other stuff, I think Amanda said a lot of what I was going to say, which is that we need multiple routes for people to access. I understand there is a role for having everything online and digital, but that doesn't suit everyone, and we all need to bear that in mind as we're designing our services. I think what we found, particularly through COVID, was people just wanted to talk to a human being, and luckily, we were able to do that with the staff and the volunteers that we have. And even when you say to them, you can go online and do that, even when they can go online, sometimes people just want to connect to another human being, and they want to tell their story, they want to be listened to, and they want to discuss. And at the moment, anyway, I think the technology with AI and bots and things is not quite at the stage where you can where we can do that digitally. You can't beat human contact.
Thanks, Andy. Jo?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that there is a real problem as a small charity that running after grants is not a sustainable, intelligent way of working. You have something good and then it disappears, and a lot of energy is put into grant making. One of the best talks I heard, and we had the lady down for the Regenerative Visions, was of an arts group, which were then also working with it. So it was a very small circular economy, poor area. And I can't do it justice, but it's the Onion Collective, and they're going to do this thing with mushroom farming and all sorts of wonderful things. But basically, they joined up the cultural provision for their community with unemployment and setting up a new factory. And I think this is a time for breaking down what we think we always did and doing something different. What sort of partnership can you make locally with a business, which would then, Nikki and I have talked about this, fund this art group or fund this continuing thing. And I did a provocation ages ago in Arts for Health Southwest about the fact that lots of artists relied on sort of projects to go in places to work with a single group, but they weren't actually, and maybe now they would, working in their local communities as preventative. So offering culture and creative expression in their local church hall. I think that we could really we really need to look at different partnerships and how we sustain things without outside input and big injections of money. I'm sure Jayne's got something really good to say there.
Jayne?
Oh, don't build me up like that, Jo. No, not really. I absolutely agree with that. I think it's not sustainable to continue to be looking all the time at external injections of funding. We've got to build something sustainable locally. But I think I think this idea that people working in the local communities preventative side is really important. To say this idea that that a protective factor for your mental well-being is engagement in creative and cultural activity, was really highlighted. There's a something here about everyday creativity, about not waiting until there's some problem and therefore you can be referred to a group, or waiting until you feel you need something in order to go to a choir or whatever. There's something about how do we create opportunities for people in their daily lives to experience, the benefits of creativity. So that might be about a sort of campaign about, so we talk about your 5 a day in terms of in terms of, you know, nutrition. And over COVID, over this crisis, there was the whole daily exercise, which had never been a thing that people had talked about before, but suddenly everyone's going out for daily exercise. We also be sort of thinking about your sort of daily dose of creativity, just sort of raise that in people's minds. But then also, then I think that then gives support to the things that can happen in communities that people value, and they say, oh, actually, you know, yeah, I will go along to that group, and maybe, you know, some people are able to pay for that, some not, but we find other, you know, multiple sort of ways of funding those things. But I agree with Jo. I think it is about people working in their local communities to really raise the profile of everyday creativity, because that is the thing that also leads to the creative industries growing, because out of that you get individuals who then set up their own businesses, become, you know, successful, etc., and you get people going into the industry. So it feels like, yeah, we shouldn't be seeing the arts as just a sort of something that comes in at a stage when people have got some problem or condition. It should be for everybody. And prior to COVID, it really wasn't, but a lot more people, I say, right across the board, the social demographic of people getting engaged in that activity was not your usual suspects. It was people who were really experiencing real hardship, really struggling with their mental health, who were actually turning to it. So some good evidence there, I think, around that.
Yeah, and I guess yesterday we heard an awful lot about the importance of stories and storytelling and personalisation, and actually through storytelling, how we can actually learn to build better services around that, and also to teach frontline staff the art of bringing those stories alive, so that it's not about case studies, it's about people's real lived experience. And I think that was a key point that's come out across this whole conference. Amanda, you've also said about that local social asset management and return on investment. And Kim also talking about, you know, and Andy about local volunteering, but also local businesses. And I think a lot of our 3 days is really about how do we really unlock social capital? How do we really start to work with communities? Tracy also raised yesterday another really good point, which is also not about, and Amanda's touched on it too today so far, about the system not imposing over the top of local communities, but actually how do we get into and work with local communities, all of which are very unique, and in the way that they engage. And as you said, Amanda, you can all be part of many communities. The point about young people, I think, is really interesting, and a question really to Kim and to Andy. Kim, there's lots of talk from government about sector skills academies, the use of the apprenticeship levy, massive investment into traineeships, and I wonder how we bring that alive for local business and local people, perhaps that are lacking aspiration in local communities, or for transport, digital skills or literacy skills, the ways in which they can actually get onto some of these schemes and activities, but they give them a really fantastic opportunity that mean they also don't want to leave Cornwall, but we retain those skills longer term.
Well, you've covered a lot there, Nikki, and it is a never-ending job to schools, to FE colleges, to parents, to communities, to try and raise aspirations in Cornwall, that there are these proper 21st century careers here in Cornwall, and that they're open to all. And all too often we've seen in the past with, you know, people after many years of EU funding and many sort of things in the sort of voluntary sector, not cutting through to people in the right way. We really do need now to get these messages across that Cornwall is at the leading edge of some of these things, and that, as I said earlier, both our FE colleges are actually really good at engaging communities. But you know, if there are ideas from this panel, I'm sure they'll be much appreciated, because it is a never-ending job. And I talk to the people at both FE colleges and the universities here, and the multitude of training providers that operate in Cornwall, to try and reach out in ever different ways to different communities, and in the different ways that Amanda was talking about earlier, the different ways in which people see themselves in different communities. And it's just an endless task, and we've got to try and raise everybody's aspirations. And I do think we lost our mojo in the second half of the 20th century here in Cornwall. We were seen as not having the skills or the scale to provide what was required at that time. But I think we've got to be aware that the creative sectors, the food and drink, the technology that we're now looking at enables Cornwall to come back to the forefront again, and there are opportunities for everybody, young people and those who've been in the workplace already and would like to retrain in ways that have never been available before, and in ways that have never been more appropriate for Cornwall before. So, you know, I know it sounds glib for all of us who are, you know, have our own motivations. It's very difficult to reach out to people who've got multiple issues in their home life and whatever. But it's a task we've got to keep at, because that's the way that Cornwall, all of us in Cornwall, are going to benefit as the 21st century continues to unfold in different ways.
Thank you, Amanda.
It was a word that Kim used there, which was just a joy to hear, and that was about aspiration, because I think there's so much talent in this county, and there's almost a I don't know if it's self-deprecating or if it's almost doubting oneself or what it is, but I was part of starting something up earlier on in the year, which is stalled a little bit because of COVID, but is about to relaunch, which is Cornwall Women's Fund, and that is about not just supporting organisations that support women, but also has a remit to inspire young women, particularly, and women of any age, actually, to be more than they think they can be, actually, because they have the capability to be, but they don't have to necessarily do what their parents did or work in the same town, or the world is their oyster. I'm not suggesting everybody should leave Cornwall for a moment, but, you know, to do things differently is possible. We've shown that actually over the last 4 months.
Yeah,
we've completely changed how we do things, and we did it really quickly. Yes, it was for an awful reason, but if we can build on that, and people can start to look at their lives as opportunities to try out different things and to do things differently to their parents' generation, and wouldn't that be a marvellous thing? Because I think we'll all reap the benefits.
Absolutely. We've had a long track record in Cornwall of innovation, as I said earlier, and you'll be pleased to know that in 2018 more than 50% of business startups were led by women. So we are beginning to get our mojo back, I think, get play to our strengths again. And we shouldn't be frightened of young people here going and experiencing other things, just as we, you know, are delighted to welcome people who are coming here to the universities or whatever, staying and making their careers and life here. And that's the sort of confident place that we want Cornwall looking forward to be, and playing a far more leading role in things which I think for far too long we've been, I think you said, self-deprecating, doubting our expertise, and I think we were, you know, told we didn't have the scale or the skills. And then we've been the poorest part of England, so we had 20 years of EU funding, which, you know, did lots of good, but amongst businesses and others arguably created a bit of a handout culture. And now I think we're getting back on our feet again, and that's why I said in my intro that I want the extension of the government's furlough scheme to be far more putting the decision making into business hands, so that they can decide what is, in a more agile way, what is suitable for them and their business going forward. And I think if we can all sing that song, Amanda, that I think that is exactly what we need to be doing. That would improve every individual's aspirations, and it's an ongoing process. Again, unfortunately, there's no, you know, there's no magic wand. We've had many years of people not feeling that the opportunities were here for them, and that's taking some time to change, but changing it is.
And I think the spin-off, sorry, I was just going to say, Nicola, I think the, I can't believe I just called you Nicola. I've never called you Nicola in my life. It's because I read it, Nikki. The spin-off of that as well is that when we create that vibrant sense and aspirational sense, is that Cornwall starts to be a really attractive place to come to. And that's also really important, that we attract in new talent, because we know, particularly in health and social care, we've got so many vacancies that we need to attract talent. Yes, we can home grow some, but we've got to attract more people down here.
And if this COVID crisis reduces the massive influence that cities have had for the last 150 years and makes people spread out a little bit better into realizing that, you know, for example, your sector, the care sector and health has been so much the heroes of the last few months that careers in those sectors are considered more highly. Then you know, you can do it in wonderful places like Cornwall. Then why wouldn't you? You know, why wouldn't more people do that?
Yeah, so just a kind of couple of comments there, like Julie Wilson has said, looking at the deal in Wigan quoted by the NHS and the King's Fund, that moving sustainable funding for valuable local assets works amazingly, and the contract between communities and those holding the purse strings closes the gap between statutory services and local populations is really interesting. Sally, just before I bring in you with your question, Andy, I wanted to just ask you about young people. So there's, again, amazing schemes like National Citizenship Service, Duke of Edinburgh Awards schemes, other things and ways to introduce young people to volunteering. I'd just like to kind of hear a little bit for the panel and for our audience really about the work that Volunteer Cornwall do with young people, and also how can we break down the barriers with volunteering in terms of removing some of the bureaucracy with the amount of different policies and procedures people have to go through. When we've actually seen through COVID, those local volunteering groups and opportunities kind of spring up and get into action really quickly.
Okay, so I'll take those the other way around if that's okay. So start with the blockages and bureaucracy. I think you're absolutely right, Nikki. We right from the outset, we had to take some tough decisions about the level of risk we were prepared to take as an organisation in enabling people to step up and do what needed to be done. And I think public sector colleagues will mind that's me saying that some of them were a bit kind of, ooh, you're going to do that, are you? But we felt that as long as we put in, as long as we had due regard to the safeguarding of individuals we were supporting, whether that be children or older people, and we felt we could build that into our model, then what volunteers don't want to be doing is spending copious amounts of time filling in forms and risk assessments, and they don't want to be, spending half their volunteering time back in the classroom learning about things. They want to be out doing and helping. So, we tried to take away from them all those elements of bureaucracy, notwithstanding that sometimes you have to have some training and inductions and things. And I do think it comes down to a question of how much risk people are prepared to take. And I think we forget sometimes that risk belongs to individuals. It's not for the NHS to decide how much risk you could have in your life, whether you should be allowed to go out for a walk because you're a bit unsteady on your feet. It's not for the police to decide that it's too risky to have children playing on the village green. Sometimes I think collectively as a society we've lost sight of, we assess our risk without assessing the risk of doing nothing. We say it would be much easier if we all stayed in our house forever and there'd be no accidents, no incidents, and everyone would be happy. But you have to balance that against the quality of life and that people would have otherwise. And so I don't think there's an easy answer to that. There's various things that make it imperative that we do have safeguarding checks and balances in place in any aspect of life these days. But the more we can take the burden of bureaucracy off volunteers and do it through organisations, the better.
Great, thank you for that.
Bit of feedback there.
Yeah.
And then on the subject of young people, I think what we need to also remember is, with no disrespect to any of us on here, I think very few of us could these days qualify as in the young people category. And yet how many times I've sat at meetings and heard people say what young people need is, and we don't always ask them, and we don't always give them the opportunity. But what young people definitely have told us they don't want to come to sit in board meetings and endless committees, and they don't want to sit on trustee boards as the token young person and then sit through 3 hours of governance. That's not to say they don't have a view and they don't have a desire to be involved and engaged. So we need to find ways that genuine, co-design, co-delivery and co-creation are all well-used phrases now, but we need to go back to those basic principles of allowing people to, young people in particular, to have a stake in communities again and to feel that they are part of the community, because for all sorts of reasons, lots of older people have decided that young people, they're an alien species and they don't want to, they don't want to be part of our community. We'll put them over there, out of sight, out of mind, and we don't want them playing out in the streets, and we don't want to see them, we don't want to hear them. But actually, young people I've been astounded by the number of young people, and Radio Cornwall's still full of stories, even now, of young people and their activities through COVID to help their community, whether it's raising funds or taking things out, delivering to older people. They definitely want to be involved. They definitely want to be part of communities, but it's not them that aren't engaging with us. It's us that's not making it easy for them to engage. So that's another one to put on our list of challenges, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Andy. Amanda and then Catherine.
I think. Sorry, did you come to me because my hand was up, or because you want me to answer that particular question?
Is your hands up?
Oh, my legacy hand. Apologies.
Okay. And Catherine.
It's just really to pick up on Andy and in agreement. Andy and I've worked together in the past some time ago, and that whole kind of thinking of whether we are imposing adult thinking on young people and adult ways of doing things, or actually how do we kind of shape things to be a cultural norm for young people to be involved. So yeah, very much concurring with Andy really, and how we can do that. And listening to Jo's got her hand up as well, but I think she's probably got some thoughts on that too.
I'm the mother of four people who are between the ages of 20 and 26, and I did a lot of voluntary work. I came into my work through volunteering from an early age, and I watched my mother volunteer in a very sort of traditional middle class ladies way. And I just think that we need to radically change so much. And one of the things is this whole idea about charities and the whole idea about volunteering, because I don't think young people are at all interested, actually, at all, but I think they are really interested in life. And I think, things have times, and charities need to change with young people, and I think they possibly can, but I do think we need to really consider it. And one of the things we've noticed is that I watch how our delivery has changed over the years. And what I realized a while ago is what we now make is community environments which are open and accessible for people with learning disabilities, but are open to everybody. So it is not a group. It is not an activity for people with learning disabilities. I mean, you still need to have closed groups, for women who are abused, for children who are carers. You need those closed communities because people need them to be strong in them and to learn from them. But then actually people just want everybody there. They want everybody on the table. We need system change. We need to look at all our systems. That's what Black Lives Matter has shown us. We need to systems change how we deliver things and how we engage with people, because they want to be engaged. But it's not even having a conversation with them. They've moved on. They've grown up with lots of things. Their perceptions are really different. And I think we really need to talk to them, and not even like what do you think about this, but just actually what they're interested in, and follow their pathways, because how they connect with each other. Because even though we have this difference in technology, most young people, not all of them, but most young people are on those platforms, and what they follow and where they go, that gives us an idea. I can't even keep up with my lot. Anyway, that was just my little throw in. Sorry.
Amanda.
So I think you're absolutely right. It's not about just talking to them. It's about having an ongoing dialogue and an ongoing relationship. I think part of the problem historically has been when we have tried, organisations, systems have tried to engage with people. They've engaged with them in a way that means they go and talk to them when they want to know something, and then they drop them again. And that frankly is rude, but it's not effective either. And it's about having a dynamic conversation, an ongoing conversation that doesn't have to be labour intensive. There are all sorts of more modern ways of engaging with. I sound like I'm really antiquated now, but very modern ways of engaging with young people. I had a message yesterday as an example. I took part in an online careers fair, Job Fest, which was run by a new It's a new recruitment app that a much younger friend of mine has been involved in starting, and it's based on the premise of the job ad goes up for a minute video, and the job application, anybody who wants to apply for it puts up a minute's video and talks about themselves and why they'd be good for the job, and then there's a procedure that goes behind that to shortlist people. But I took part in something like this a few days ago, and the next day I had a really simple video sent to me. I can't remember WhatsApp to me. I can't remember how it was sent to me, but it was a really simple thank you. It lasted about 30 seconds, and it was done from the team of 4 people who'd been part of setting up this conference, and it was done on a mobile phone, and it was through like that. So it was cheap, it was easy, it was quick. And those sorts of things and ways of staying in touch with people are so straightforward. And we've just got to move with what works for people and stop doing things that work for organisations.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I've been following some young people that are doing some great work using Instagram. You Versus You is a channel led by a young refugee who is now inspiring other young people, and he does all of it working with social workers, employers, young people leaving care, all through Instagram. And the following that's got nationally is absolutely fantastic. So it is about how we have conversations in the way, as you've all highlighted, in the way that young people would want to, and engage where they're engaging, and that's that kind of whole social listening, isn't it? And again, probably more around young people's stories, and giving them the chance to also to tell them in their own words, I think. Claire, you also would like to kind of come in on this, and then Jayne.
Thank you. I mean, from a charity perspective, Cornwall Hospice Care, we rely hugely on volunteers in so many aspects of the charity, and we wouldn't be able to do half of what we do without our volunteers across fundraising and retail and within the hospices themselves. And I know in the past I was working within the fundraising team. Our volunteers have come from a wide range of places, from colleges, from adult sector, but definitely from the younger sector as well. And people have come to us maybe just on a one-off basis for volunteering, but also volunteers have come back and back again from all different age groups. And there's just such a wealth of knowledge and skills and out there that we can use with volunteers that's so essential. And certainly from a community engagement perspective, going into the future, the use of volunteers is going to be really important for us. We're a small team, and the amount of people that we want to access and have a relationship with, a connection with, we can't just do it with us. So I think volunteering is, it's going to play a huge part in the future, and across all age groups and all backgrounds as well. It's really important.
Thank you. Jayne.
So it's this issue about young people and volunteering and how that works. So again, I'm the mother of young people, not young children anymore, and I see them getting engaged in all sorts of work on a voluntary basis. They would never describe themselves as volunteers because it's work that it's stuff that they're doing themselves. It comes from their passion and their interest. So whether that's campaigning or raising awareness of issues or starting up self-help groups, or whatever it is, but they would never describe themselves as a volunteer. So there is something about the language, I think, that is sort of needs thinking about, if we're to acknowledge that some of that stuff is, about contributing to your local community and moving things forward. But I think the other thing that's really important is we need to, recognise how I think young people have felt excluded almost from this whole experience of COVID in terms of any attention being paid to them. The focus inevitably has been on older people, isolated people, people who are shielding, who generally, not always obviously, but are older. And the young people that I've talked to have said they felt like no one's cared. People are saying, well, they're not going to be ill anyway, so we don't need to worry about them. And and the fact that they've been stuck at home with their families and not any friends for ages, that's pretty grim. If I was 14 and forced to stay at home with my family 24/7, that wouldn't have been a great experience. And then we've had the exams fiasco. All of that stuff, I think, has led to young people just feeling actually we don't care. Society does not care about their experience, and so we have to find ways of really demonstrating, even if we can only do that locally, of demonstrating that we acknowledge that they are as important as anybody else in our society. In fact, they are the future. And and we've got to find ways of doing that, I think, because they are, the ones I've talked to are feeling pretty fed up about the way that they've felt neglected during this period.
Thank you, Kim.
I couldn't agree more with some of those things, Jane. I mean, we've got to change the language here. And one of the communities that we're talking about here are businesses, and young people tend to want to work for and buy from businesses with a purpose. And that purpose has got to be communicated to them and by them, indeed, in words which appeal to millennials and Generation Z and not. So I think it's very important when you're reaching out, all of you in the voluntary sector, to business owners and to their colleagues, that the young people there are likely to be very keen on social engagement, social responsibility, but perhaps it is the language which is a bit of a block. And I think perhaps that's something that we, and I'm probably the eldest here, can probably look to change and re-engage them, and get them re-enthused in a way that they realise they can make a difference. That's part of the aspiration that we were talking about earlier, is people realising that they can, in their terms, make a difference, and that we can see that the benefits to community and to their smaller milieu from doing things voluntarily really shown much more clearly. And I think that's again one of these, we can never relax on that. That needs to be kept up for forever. But perhaps a start would be to really look at the words we use and see what is there an alternative. Ask all of our children what words they would use, and let's have a panel around that. Would be quite an interesting discussion, I think.
Fantastic, thanks, Kim. And I mean, I think again, it's also, isn't it, about that, as a lot of people are putting in the comments, really is about that engagement with younger children. A lot of comments coming through about children under 11 not often having a voice, and actually how do we start to see young children actually seeing participation as part of the norm. And I guess where that ties into economic activity is the transferable skills that employers want to see in terms of communication, productivity, teamwork, all the things we know is actually things that we could be providing that progression pathway from very young children all the way through to employment and transferable skill sets in communities, which also ties into health, as we know. When you look at communities and areas of deprivation with longevity of life, with those people that are economically active and better able to participate as opposed to inactivity. So I think that absolutely is a huge conversation, and as you're all saying, something that perhaps we could focus on, particularly at another time. And I think too, Helen Charlesworth-May has just joined us onto our panel as well, which is absolutely brilliant. And Helen is the Joint Accountable Officer for Health and Care in Cornwall Council, and also NHS Clinical Commissioning Group. And one of her questions to us yesterday, which is absolutely apt for this conversation, is what is it we want? What is it within our communities that we're suggesting ideas that can go up to those strategic leaders as that grassroots bottom-up approach? So Helen, thank you. And I don't know, I'm not putting you on the spot the minute you join, but it's always great to hear from you, kind of your thoughts on some of the kind of points you might have heard already. And you're on mute at the moment.
So you'll have to forgive me, I've been on holiday for 3 weeks and I appear to have forgotten how to operate Teams whilst I've been off. Unfortunately, I've only just joined the call, so I didn't hear very much. I came in on that conversation about how do we engage with young people, and not just the sort of young people we normally talk about in that sort of 13, 14 upwards category, but also those very young children. Now clearly that it's not my background, but I agree with you. We need to start working out how do we have conversations out beyond the people who normally get involved in those conversations, and that's not meant to be a derogatory statement. Those people that normally talk to us are the people who've been able to help us shape things so far, but how do we get better at talking to those people that we sometimes just overlook? Yeah,
absolutely. And Jo, I just wanted to bring you in here in terms of, some of the interesting work that's occurred through COVID-19 is also about reaching those people in their own homes that for a range of different reasons, young or old, have not been able to fully engage, but the toolkit that we use to reach them. So it's not always about words, it's also about the different forms of communication and accessibility. So I wonder if you could just touch on things like how you've used sketchbooks and some of those online sessions that you've run to do that.
Yeah, sure. So we have something called Shallal sketchbooks. So we're very committed to the fact that people always have access, so you don't have to pay to join. So you get a sketchbook for free. Somebody will nowadays, so you can just ask for one in any way, or if you've been referred, someone, the lady who runs it now, will ring you up and have a little chat, send you one in the post. And it's just to, you know, to draw in, to doodle in, to paste pictures in. It's just really opening up that whole creative possibility and having a regular conversation with someone about it. And then we've also gone into Zoom sessions. So we have Zoom sessions as well. And as a charity, we aim never to stop anything we've started. I really am in it for the long haul. You know, I worked in institutions years ago. I mean, many of you remember Budok Hospital. I worked there. I know that the people who are the most disturbed and the most distressed are usually the most creative. So, you know, those possibilities are always there. And then what Nikki's seen is someone who was referred to us through sketchbooks, then went into our studios when the studios were open, and we're beginning to slowly open them up again, maybe in October or something. Then went to dance groups, and all those things have transferred into Zoom now. And like I said earlier, you know, obviously if we can't reach people on Zoom, we phone them. Lou Brett, who's in it, she's started, there's a postal project as well. So we've just tried, and we always do it by asking everybody. I mean, we're quite a small group, so it's easier. But at the very beginning, I was going to have a slideshow, you know, we just rang everyone up or contacted them and said, how do you best want to be contacted? What do we do to work with you? And also what we have is we have this sort of sliding scale of what people can do. So the sketchbooks is obviously it starts with a book, but we've also sort of given out bigger books because some people don't have motor control. You know, I've given it to writers before and they've written in it or whatever. Children, people make it in families, people make it with their children. You know, there are all sorts of ways. There's no standard of art you have to do in it. And then from that, people talk to people, they make friends, and they go into the other groups as well. So it's that always opening up the arts in answer to what people are interested in. Is that what you want?
Yeah, thanks, Jo. And I guess it's come up in different panels as well and the last couple of days is that, you know, again, the importance of storytelling and the ways that, as you said, Helen, that we reach people, and we have to give people the tools to tell their stories, and we need to be able to train frontline staff to engage with it. And one of the comments that also came up yesterday was about how we could use health and social care staff to also be able to mentor people in local communities to develop skills. And Kim, I guess that's the same in terms of developing mentoring circles with businesses and how they can also support people in those local communities that could also become employees of the future. I also just wanted to touch on things like Project Search, which we don't have in Cornwall at the moment, but also employees for people with learning disabilities up to a 75% success rate, particularly around employing people in hospitals. And those different types of schemes that can encourage different people from different communities to engage, which I guess is, you know, one of the big challenges that we're talking about, particularly where we have rural communities and often a lack of transport, which can cost a lot of people a lot of money to actually get to an activity. So one of the things that virtual technology, I would love to kind of also have a view from COVID-19 is we've also seen people engage in completely different ways before, and they may not have been able to access a physical group, but they have now actually been able to access a different community because they don't have to travel that distance. It's accessible online. And also some views about how we can use the lorry project and things like that. They're actually going around the county, and how we can better maximise our shared resources to have shared communication and better collaboration. So I appreciate there's a lot in there, but I'd really appreciate if anyone want to take any of those points. Jayne.
I'm just going to pick up on the point about people engaging digitally for the first time and how that's been. I mean, it's been fantastic to see people who felt that they couldn't do these things, and they have, and they are self-taught, and they are doing all sorts of things. So, you know, I'm in various sort of writing for wellbeing groups, and really we worried that people would not be able to access this because they really had never, you know, they'd never been on any sort of platform like this at all. And actually, because they so much wanted to be part of the group, they really made the effort and have learned loads of stuff. So again, but how do we support people as we go forward to maintain those skills, you know, to keep that going? But also, some people have commented to me how they have preferred engaging, again, particularly it's young people, how they have preferred engaging initially digitally, particularly when they're talking about issues that are affecting them, because that has meant it's felt safer for them at that time. And that's not to say that I think it's always a good idea for people to always just be doing that, but that idea that you can, you know, it gives you that little bit of distance if you're not sure and if you're lacking in confidence maybe. So there's some benefits out of this as well, although, you know, for me, I think for lots of us, you know, the face-to-face we think is better, but it's not always better for everybody all the time. So yeah, it'd be worth picking that out as well. In terms of the storytelling, you know, I think that's hugely important, and it is. I think the arts gives people those opportunities to express those stories, and we need to be getting the stories out of COVID, like, you know, Tracy was saying, the stories coming out of this pandemic. You know, the stories of practitioners as well as the stories of you know, we're all experiencing it, but you know what I mean, from all perspectives, I think would be really good.
Great, thank you. I guess too, I'm just kind of interested in, we've heard over COVID-19 the challenges, because obviously for people that are deaf, that are traditionally will be lip reading, and obviously everyone's behind a mask, and actually the kind of forms of communication we're using as organisations to be able to reach out to people. It'd be great to kind of hear your thoughts on how we can really develop accessible communication. Jo?
One of the things I came across a little while ago, and I've always believed in it, but I hadn't come across the actual title for it, is the principles of universal design. And I think we all ought to just sort of take that and go with it and challenge ourselves with it. So just like we need to look at donut economics and challenge, you know, our businesses and our practices through the lens of the people and the planet, we also need to challenge everything we do through universal design. And really, you know, let's change it. Where are the signers? You know, no one who's deaf is going to turn up if you haven't got a BSL interpreter. Where's the texting when it's going on? You know, we did our Zoom thing, and I suddenly realised that I'm an accessible charity, and I hadn't made it accessible. I had to go and raise £650 from Complete Communication to get someone typing while people were talking. But then it meant I had a whole, you know, thing back. I had a record of the whole event and someone signing. We need to challenge it. It's really hard, but if we can just get it ingrained and then half the people that you're worried about and feel that are isolated and aren't communicating, once we make it accessible, they'll come. So and I really, so my last little thing, I really think, and for children as well, we need to teach signing. And I know signing is a very complex political world, but we need to teach it to young children, because when we get old, most of us will lose our hearing. So we need it as a second language, and we need it in schools when children are learning to speak. Because, you know, sometimes even people with autism, people are scared, but they'll sign to you. You know, we need to take on these things and change them now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Helen, just a question. We've talked an awful lot today and over the last 2 days, and you opened the question to us yesterday about, you know, what are our community's thoughts on how system leaders are going to design services going forward. And some of the comments today have been that contract between communities and those holding the purse strings to close the gap between statutory services and local populations, and who should have the final say in what's needed. And it'd just be kind of great to kind of get your thoughts around that.
Well, that's not a difficult question to end the afternoon with, is it?
I've been kind on a Friday.
So it is a really, really, I mean, it's a really, really interesting question, and it is fraught politically, economically, from all perspectives. So So I am one of those people who likes to start with the evidence. And I am also a firm believer that when you take the evidence and you talk to people, and that evidence is not just data numbers, it's the qualitative stuff too, and you talk to people about what is it we're trying to achieve and what is the best way of achieving that based on the resources we have available and what the evidence is telling us, that you can usually get to a really good compromise. And the big issue that you have to overcome is that the evidence and professional input into that design is not simply the traditional people who've held those professional roles. So I've worked, I mean, I started my career in the NHS and I came into social care, and I've sort of flitted backwards and forwards between the two of them. And I think and this is such a simple and silly thing almost, but somebody once said to me, well, you've given me a service, but if it doesn't make me feel better, there's not much point in it, is there? And I thought, oh, that's a very sensible and wise thing to say, isn't it? And I've tried to take that with me onwards through my career. And what I know now, which I didn't know 25 years ago, is that I don't know very much. And as I sit at the top of the organisation, I see my job primarily as being the person who facilitates the asking of the right questions. And so some of that is about me actually asking the right questions, but some of that is about putting in place the right mechanisms to ask the right questions of the right people. And the challenge we always have to be putting down is, so who are we going to talk to and how are we going to talk to them? Because the how is almost as important as the who. And before I joined this call, I was doing a call. The council runs a staff reward scheme. The reward was getting to spend an hour talking to me. So that was the reward this time round. And I was talking to those people, and they weren't from adult social care. They were actually from our benefit teams. And a couple of them were describing some really difficult telephone calls they'd taken and how they'd become much more involved with the individuals on the other end of the telephone. And they were describing people to me that they were working with that would never come anywhere near the council, would never come anywhere near the NHS, those big institutions. They are not on anyone's radar. And so the question for me is, how do we talk to those people? And how do we talk to them about what will make their lives better? Because their aspirations and expectations will be really low. And it'll be a really small thing that will make the most profound differences to them. But how do I hear what they have to say? And it takes a lot for me to hear what they've got to say, because it comes through lots and lots of layers. And there is something for me about how I empower my team to go out and have those conversations, and how do I make it easier to hear, for me to hear what they've got to say, and for my staff to hear and act upon what those people say. And actually, the only people who are going to be able to do that are all the people that have been on this conference, the people in voluntary sector organisations and those really small local organisations. And so how do I hear what they say? And how do I encourage and cajole and persuade the workforce and my peers and even those more senior people to understand that that's what will make the most profound difference? So that's my challenge to me, and I'm really conscious that it is a question I don't necessarily know the answer to. So I'm really interested in what comes out of these last 3 days, and the commitment is that I'll work with Nikki, because Nikki's on our governing body. I'll work with Nikki and those others of you who are sort of actively engaged in this on a day-to-day basis to try and make that difference.
Thanks, Helen. That's an amazing answer. And Amanda's just said too, some really important points, because it's long been the case that people are spoken to only when the system needs something, and how we build that ongoing dialogue and relationship so the right questions are asked at the right time and what people want to say is heard. And also Julie Wilson thinking that we already have a start, the high intensity workers who are dealing with our most vulnerable citizens can give lots of narrative and direct access to people and their aspirations. And Kim, I'd like to also just say the kind of, the role of business within this. So Nando's and other big national organisations actually open up their premises to work with local charities within a 3-mile radius of their cafes, and the opportunities for people just to come into a cafe to have a conversation with health professionals, or to use a completely different environment where they feel comfortable, is also a massive opportunity. I just kind of wondered your thoughts on how we can get better at doing some of those things.
Well, I think as many speakers have been saying, these last few months have been a huge catalyst for change, haven't they? And I think that some of the ways in which we've worked better, and some of the things which, as Jayne was saying, that we've now fessed up that we've enjoyed more about these times, we need to hang on to them. And I think that, as I said earlier, we need people with a plan to do that. But I think when you cite Nando's nationally, there are plenty of ways we can work that with individual small businesses here in Cornwall. So whether that's a cafe or a shop or a office or whatever it might be, to just keep that sort of community spirit going. And I think it's probably easier done on a local level for us. And then, as I say, if Cornwall demonstrates some thought leadership around this, what starts here can work out elsewhere from us starting here. So let's do those sort of things, and then let's sing about them loudly so that people know that that's what is expected. That contract between a business and its customers and its potential customers, and as we were saying, young people who want to buy from and work for a business with a purpose. That's a really good way of demonstrating your local community commitment, and hopefully will be repaid by people buying from local businesses then, and it then becomes symbiotic, and that old economic accelerator really keeps the money in the system here. So yeah, lots to be gained from that.
Yeah, I agree, and the point I would follow up with that is I think it's really important that the public sector doesn't think it's got all the answers, and absolutely engaging with our local businesses, particularly somewhere like Cornwall, where there's a massive network of small and medium-sized enterprises, but the second thing, which I think I do feel here that I haven't felt in other places, is that sense of social solidarity and social commitment and social value, and wanting to put something back. It's not all about getting rich, it's about putting something into the community. Absolutely,
and whether the businesses are set up as a CIC or traditional model, they're all embedded in their community. I was saying, Helen, before you joined, that 97% of Cornwall's business owners live in Cornwall. They're very embedded in their communities. Running a business in Cornwall is not something which somebody else, a fat cat, does. It's something which, we all will know people who are running their small business. They are absolutely embedded here and very socially aware, And we all joke a bit, I'm sure, in our own circles, you know, that you need to be careful what you say to them, because they're going to know somebody else who is either related or knows them very well. So that goes for businesses as well. And yeah, the vast majority of people in business here are very socially aware.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you know, this type of approach that we're talking about is very exciting and a great takeaway from this event. And also, you know, we know, like in communities like St Ives, where perhaps communities at the top of the hill don't feel that they can actually, and from some of the estates, don't feel like that they can actually engage with what's on their front. So the beautiful cafes and the ways that they can engage with that inspiring and environment. So setting up these kinds of activities where we're connecting local people to local business, and being able to then perhaps put some, you know, some collaborative input in, I think would be a fantastic takeaway. Sally, I see you've got your point up, your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Right, Sally Turner. Yes, I agree with what Kim's been saying, and Helen and others. And I think the idea of people coming down from the ivory towers, if we just put it that way for now, and communicating more with people is an excellent idea. Just as a brief example, stories in the area where I live, Perranporth, had terrible trouble with water. Southwest Water, 2 chief hunchos came. There was a meeting in the parish rooms, and it was excellent, because there's a lot of anger in the community about the way the water was dealt with and the flooding, etc., etc. Long story short, and the 2 guys who came, they weren't defensive. They talked about their job, what they had to do, how they had to do it, what the statutory requirements were, what the limitations were that they had to work with. And by the end of the meeting, there was a huge understanding between the people and between the people who were doing the job. And in fact, we all went away going, thank God we're not doing that, because it was just so difficult. And it made us all appreciate as well, much broader than that, and their role with planning and planning's limitations and blah, 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 etc. So people who actually work in the system, you were saying, Helen, how do you get people to actually to listen? Maybe they go and sit in the benefit offices and make, you know, notices put up and say somebody's going to be there from whichever department you want to put them up from, and talk. And maybe somebody goes to an estate somewhere from housing or benefit or whatever, and highlights the fact that they're going to be in somebody's house because they've, you know, through community navigators, etc., they've identified somebody be willing to host them for a day, morning, or whatever it is, so they can actually have a safe space where people can go and talk to them and bring their stories. And so there's a lot more learning between those people who are trying to deliver and devise the services and those people who need things, who are not getting it, or have things that are not suitable or adequate. Just a thought.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Helen?
Sorry, it reminds me of a story. We were implementing a new complaints process. This is a long time ago now, and I asked somebody in a different organisation what their complaints process was, and he said, our complaints process is this big sofa in the reception area, and if you come in with a complaint, the receptionist phones the person or the department head that you're complaining about, and you sit down on the sofa and you have the conversation. And I thought, oh my God, that's a brave man. But it really made a difference to the way that organisation worked with people out. And actually, it's a fantastic idea, and it stayed with me for a long time. And trying to have those face-to-face conversations in every environment is really, really important. I just think it can be quite scary, is all I'm going to say.
Oh yeah. Yeah, need to buy more sofas, Helen.
Absolutely.
So Tracy Roos, unfortunately, she just had to leave us, but she's kind of said they've been approached, Age UK, by businesses with several storefronts across Cornwall to work with them and create connective services and a place where carers and others can come for information, support and guidance. And they've seen the impact of people power over the last couple of months. So that's a win-win and great brand association. And Amanda has just also said, is that something like that we could do with Cornwall Link for businesses to promote their offer, Kim? So again, another kind of thought-provoking thing for us to think about. We've got a couple of hands up and I'm massively conscious of time. So Andy, Joe, and then Amanda.
Okay, thank you. Just quickly to follow on from Sally's point there. Some years ago, we took the senior management team of Devon and Cornwall Police for Cornwall on a volunteering day when they went down to Pengegan and did, in their cities, and did a community cleanup alongside the community. And after a bit of hesitation, some of the people eventually came out of their house to say, "What are you lot doing, and who are you?" And they got into a conversation and they started to explain, we're from the police. And the residents couldn't understand why the police would come on the day off or in their own time to come and clean up their community, and the police officers couldn't understand, why. But by the end of it, they had, both sides went away with a much better understanding. So it's sometimes finding different ways of presenting a problem to both sides. And as you said with your water people, Sally, when you understand from the other person's perspective about all the things they have to do in order to bring your clean water to your taps or whatever, you can begin to at least think about how you might do things differently to help that happen. And I think the same thing applies for all of us with our health and care system. The more we understand about the complexities of it, the more it's, certainly in my case, has made me change my behaviours, because I can see how I'm not just a passive recipient of services that sits and waits until I'm ill and then someone comes and fixes me, but I have a responsibility, not just for me, but for the people that I work with, the people that I live around, and so on.
Thank you. Jo, then Amanda.
I was reading about someone who was working with people on death row a while ago, and basically what he said was stay close. And I thought that was really beautiful and terribly simple. And he just said, if you want to work with people and you want to be with people, you need to stay close. And however we do that, and I think we need to stay close, listen to what Andy just said, through positive experiences, whether they're arts or sports or just walking down the road, like, people used to like the local policeman or something. Actually, you need to see people regularly and not in a stress environment. And then quite often you preempt and you don't have those problems because you've seen it coming, or they trust you so that they come to you before they've got angry or aggressive or distressed. So I just think however we do it, when we look at working with people, we need to actually make sure that the people who are working with them, one, actually really like them and care about them. Because there's a thing around schools, I'm sorry, but lots of school children, my children were home education at one time, lots of school children don't feel that teachers like them very much. I know some teachers really love kids, but you need to like the people you work with. So first of all, people need to feel liked, and then they need to feel that you are interested and on their side. However we make that happen through lots of lovely, I think, different activities like that. So to stay close, and then we'll hear it. I like the idea of sofas. Can we have lots of them, please?
Amanda.
I think that stay close is beautiful, and I think it absolutely encapsulates what I was trying to say about building relationships and having ongoing dialogue and relationships, and not just picking people up and dropping them. Because actually, if you're talking to people all the time, not just when things are in crisis or you want to know something, then you're always building a relationship, which when you need to get some information or find out what's going on, people are there and they're ready to talk to you and they trust you. And just going back to the sofas, I can imagine those conversations were very difficult, but one of the biggest things that builds trust is being prepared to show your own vulnerability. And actually, if you're open and honest with people, they really respect it. And that if you give that bit of yourself that's vulnerable, then people are prepared to listen. And I just think that, and that all comes back to, I love that phrase, stay close. That's brilliant.
Thank you so much. And we're up to time, and I want to say a massive thank you, because this afternoon I think has gone far better than we ever imagined. The dialogue's been absolutely amazing, and the panel fantastic. Thank you so much. And we've had so much chat going on. The team are going to have real fun trying to capture everything. I'm going to hand over to Gina Starnes now, who's the Director of Clinical Services for Cornwall Hospice Care, to do our plenary. And then we'll just end with a big thank you to everybody.
Hi everybody, I just want to say what a fantastic few days of contribution and really good warmth across Cornwall, I think, and organisations, and that willingness for people to work together and to make things different, and something that's kind of come out of this COVID crisis really has really brought people together, and that's really wanting to do things in a different way. So it's about, I think, you know, taking those good bits and moving them forward. And actually lovely to have the conversation, and actually what do we do now as a large group across Cornwall to actually make things happen and to keep the good bits, really, so not to lose those. So some really good highlights for me, actually, how people have talked about patient stories and people stories, and having those at the centre of what we do, and listen to people's real experience rather than doing to, because actually I think sometimes we get into that mode, and actually it's really important to understand and hear properly people's experiences. Something that stuck with me from a couple of days ago, and I think it was Tracy that said it, that actually, you know, if you're not digitally connected at the moment, you're not connected. And actually, so it's about how we take the best of being digitally connected, but also think about those other people that actually don't have the Wi-Fi systems, that don't have the technology, that don't have the kit, that don't have the know-how, and things that we're, you know, bringing in, the new initiatives that we're bringing in, that we make sure that that is actually available to all. And I think also, particularly today, looking at that huge age range and you know, ensuring that people across the whole spectrum are being, you know, are kind of being considered, and that their stories are being heard, really. I think also it's that language, particularly from today, and I think, Jayne, you made quite a lot of comments around this. It's that language that other age groups use, and to making sure that we are, you know, either whether it's down with the kids and using the right speak, or actually being able to modify our language to make sure that people feel involved, because actually we do sometimes just get very blinkered in where we're coming from, and I think that's hugely important, and to hear those voices. So for me, I think actually working together to bring people together over these last few days has been really great, and I thank Nikki and Lolly and Tracy and Helen and Clare and the team who've managed to bring people together. I look forward to seeing where this goes in the future, and I know, you know, for some of us this kind of Zoom way of working is becoming our new normal, but also I think it's how we can use the technology and the ways of working like this to really shift things in Cornwall, and there seems to be a real willingness to do that. So I really hope that we can use these kind of fora ongoingly, and I know that the team are looking at whether we can do something with regards to our specialty, which is the end of life care, and how we can use that perhaps in a similar vein kind of come the new year. But I've really enjoyed listening to people. I want to thank people hugely for their time and investment in this, and I really look forward to seeing where it can go. So thank you from our perspective.
Thanks, Gina. That's brilliant. And just to say to everybody, we will be summarising the last 3 days, and being able to kind of feed ideas, suggestions back to everybody that's participated, alongside all the PowerPoints, discussions, and the survey that's gone out, just to kind of give us your thoughts and some feedback really on how we might do something different in the future, or what's really worked for you across the last 3 days. So Lolly, I don't know if you want to say anything before we go, but absolutely thank you to all of you for taking part from me.
No, just a massive thank you. I mean, just to get it to this stage is incredible. We had this crazy idea that we ought to be networking, and we couldn't network for obvious reasons, so let's have this crazy idea of doing it online. Somehow it's worked. I don't know how. 3 months in the planning, it's come together. I couldn't be more chuffed. Thank you, Nikki. An astounding job as chair. I don't know how you keep that information in your head. We've all been like ducks, as you can imagine, on the water, looking like it's really smoothly running. Everyone's feet are going crazy behind the screens. I know mine has. When I'm off camera, I'm all over it, and I know the rest of the team are. So thank you, a million thank yous for turning up and making this such a vibrant and fantastically broad discussion. And we hope that you'll join us for what we hope to be a really interesting end of life and palliative engagement sessions in January, and all kinds of things happening in May, we hope. And then please God, we can meet and do a live version of this next year. Who knows? If you'd all come and play, we'll be glad to have you.
Thanks, Lolly. And unless there's any final comments from anybody, I really hope you have a great weekend, and thank you again from all of us.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jayne. Thanks, Amanda.
Trying to go. There we go.
Yay!